The dust rose finely between Elisa's bare feet as she hung the sheets on the clothesline, her fingers reddened by the cold water from the tap. The sun was almost disappearing behind the hill, and the cicadas began that deep chorus that announced the end of another day just like the last. She didn't look at the sky. He didn't look at anything, really. He had the look of someone who had learned that expecting something from the world was the shortest path to disappointment. At 23, Elisa already carried in her body the weariness of someone who had lived twice as long. Not from illness, not from a single tragedy, but from that nameless form of suffering, repetition. The repetition of days, of obligations, of words that no one addresses to you, of the silence that occupies the place where there should be affection. The farm belonged to Uncle Antenor, her deceased mother's brother. When her mother died, Elisa was 14 years old and had only one dress. Her uncle received her not as a niece, but as labor. He never said it explicitly. He didn't need to. The way he pushed the list of chores onto her at dawn, the way he never invited her to sit at the table when there were visitors, the way he talked about her to the neighbors saying, "That one eats and doesn't work," when she had spent the whole day at the sink, at the stove, on the cold cement floor with a damp cloth in her hands. All of that said enough. Elisa wasn't part of the family. Elisa was part of the house, like the furniture, like the broom leaning against the door. Cousin Renata, the uncle's daughter, was 2 years younger and lived in the city. She would come on weekends wearing new clothes, with nail polish on her nails, and that air of someone who doesn't know the weight of a bucket of water. When she arrived, she would sit on the porch with her cell phone and order coffee. Elisa would bring it. Renata wouldn't thank her. Sometimes she would comment, without looking, that the coffee was weak, that the bathroom towels smelled of mildew, that the house was too hot. And Elisa would listen. She always listened, because listening was the only thing left for her in that house where no one ever asked what she felt, what she wanted, what she dreamed about when she lay on the thin mattress in the back room and stared at the dark ceiling until sleep came. She did dream, yes, not of wealth, not of fame. She dreamed of something so simple that she was ashamed to admit it even to herself. She dreamed of someone who would truly look at her, who would see her there, standing with cracked hands and tied back hair, and recognize that behind that silence there was a whole person, full of things kept in her heart that had never found a way out. It was on a Tuesday in March, with the heat clinging to their skin like punishment, that the truck appeared on the dirt road. Elisa was picking okra in the garden when she heard the sputtering of the engine. She looked up and saw the old truck bed parking near the corral. A tall, thin man got out, carrying a worn leather bag and a straw hat that had seen better days. He looked around as if trying to recognize a place he had never visited. Uncle Antenor appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a dish towel, and shouted something Elisa didn't understand. Then the two shook hands. Not as friends, as if sealing a deal. His name was Daniel. Elisa only found out that night when she overheard her uncle explaining to his wife that he had hired a new farmhand from the north to look after the cattle and repair the fences. "He charges cheap and doesn't talk much," said her uncle, as if that were the greatest quality a human being could have. Daniel would stay in the tool shed, which had a room in the back with a hammock and a window without glass. Elisa looked at that room from afar and thought it resembled her own, a place where someone with nowhere else to go is put. In the early days, Daniel was just a shadow crossing the yard at dawn and returning at dusk. He didn't speak to anyone except when necessary. He would take the plate of food Elisa left on the kitchen table, eat in silence, wash his own plate, and leave. Elisa watched him from afar, not out of interest, out of habit. She observed everything and everyone on that farm because observation was the only luxury she had. And there was something about that man that bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. It was like looking into a foggy mirror and realizing the reflection wasn't hers, but it could be. Daniel had large, calloused hands, but he handled things with an uncanny delicacy. Elisa noticed this the day he found a baby bird fallen near the barn. Any other farmhand would have ignored it or accidentally stepped on it. Daniel stopped, crouched down, and with his thick fingers lifted the little creature with a care that seemed disproportionate for a man of that size. He placed the chick in a forked branch of the mango tree and watched until he was sure it was safe. He didn't know that Elisa was watching everything from the kitchen window. And Elisa didn't know that this small gesture would be the beginning of something that would change both of their lives in a way neither of them was prepared to accept. A week later, her uncle sent Elisa to take lunch to the fence of the north pasture where Daniel worked. She carried the aluminum lunchbox and a bottle of cold water, walking slowly among the termite mounds. When she arrived, Daniel was sitting on a rock, shirtless, sweat dripping down his back, an open book in his hands. Elisa stopped, not because of his body, but because of the book. A book there, in that place, in the hands of a farmhand, was so out of place it seemed like a set mistake. Daniel noticed her presence, quickly closed the book, and put it away in his toolbox as if hiding a weakness. Elisa pretended not to see. She left the lunchbox, said, "Enjoy your lunch," in her usual low voice, and left. But the image remained. The book remained. The shame in his eyes at being caught reading remained. Gradually, without either of them planning it, the meetings became routine. Elisa would bring lunch, Daniel would thank her with a nod, then with a word, then with a short phrase. "It rained last night, the ground is good to walk on." Or, "This okra is better than yesterday's." Phrases that said nothing and said everything. They said that he saw her, that he noticed what she did, that her existence didn't go unnoticed in that corner of the world. And for Elisa, who had spent years being transparent, it was like receiving sunshine after winter that was far too long. Renata returned one Saturday in April, driving her new boyfriend's car and wearing sunglasses that cost more than Elisa earned in 3 months. When she saw Daniel in the corral, she stopped, took off her sunglasses, and smiled in that way she had when she found something she thought deserved her attention. "Who's the new farmhand?" she asked Elisa, without taking her eyes off him. Elisa felt a tightening in her chest, something that wasn't jealousy, because to feel jealousy, you have to believe you have a right over someone, and Elisa never believed she had a right over anything. It was fear. Fear that the little she had, those nods, those short phrases, that minimal recognition, would also be taken away. And so it was. Renata began appearing in the corral with glasses of juice, with open smiles, with questions that turned Daniel's life into a spectacle. "Where are you from again? Why did you end up here? Don't you have family?" Daniel answered politely, but without enthusiasm. Elisa watched from afar, her hands busy with dishes or laundry, and felt each of Renata's smiles like a small knife, slowly twisting in a wound she didn't even know existed. Because now I knew. Now I knew that small feeling that grew when Daniel said, "Thank you," or when he left a bouquet of wildflowers on top of the empty lunchbox, had a name. And the name was love, a quiet, shy love, born among pots and pans and clotheslines, without any right to exist in a world that had already decided that Elisa didn't deserve that kind of thing. One Thursday night, Elisa overheard her uncle talking to Renata on the porch. The farmhand is hardworking, but there's something strange about him. He talks too little, he hides things. I saw him with some papers in his room, the kind of thing someone with a complicated past would say. Renata shrugged. "Maybe he ran away from something, Dad, but he's handsome, that's for sure." Her uncle laughed, a dry laugh, and said, "Handsome doesn't fill your stomach. If he causes trouble, I'll fire him the same day." Elisa, leaning against the hallway wall, felt her stomach clench. Because she knew that causing trouble, in her uncle's mouth, could mean anything. It could mean existing in the wrong way. A week later, Elisa took her lunch to the pasture and found Daniel sitting on the same rock, but this time, he didn't hide the book. He looked at her and said, in the softest voice she had ever heard from that serious mouth, "Do you like to read?" Elisa sat on the grass, the lunchbox between them like a border. "I've never owned a book," he replied, and there was no sadness in his voice, only truth. Daniel was silent for a moment, then opened the book to a page and read aloud. It was a passage about the sea, about waves crashing against rocks and then receding, about the patience of the water that, over time, sculpts even the hardest rock. Elisa listened breathlessly, not because the text was beautiful, and it was, but because it was the first time someone had shared something with her. Not a task, not an order, not criticism, a beauty. Someone had decided that she deserved to hear something beautiful. The following days were the most dangerous and the most vibrant of Elisa's life. Dangerous because she began to smile, and smiling in that house was like turning on a light in the dark. It drew attention. Her uncle noticed. "You're too cheerful, girl. You have plenty of work and you look silly." Renata noticed, too, in a different way. She began to observe the times Elisa left with her lunchbox, how long it took her to return. One day, she followed from a distance and saw the two of them sitting on the grass, Daniel reading aloud and Elisa listening with her eyes closed, her face raised to the sun like a flower that has finally found the direction of the light. Renata didn't say anything at the time. She kept it to herself. And the following Saturday, in front of her uncle and aunt, she let it slip as if it were nothing. "Dad, did you know that Elisa's been meeting with the farmhand in the pasture? Every day, at lunchtime. The two of them alone." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that precedes storms. Her uncle looked at Elisa with that old contempt, now amplified by something new, the feeling that his property, his farmhand, his niece employee were slipping out of his control. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice low, which was worse than if he shouted. Elisa didn't answer. What could she say? That she brought food and listened to someone read? That that was the only good thing she had? That there was nothing wrong with wanting to be treated like a human being? The uncle told Daniel to leave the next day. He said he didn't need a farmhand anymore, that the fence was already built, that the cattle had been counted. Lies so subtle that anyone could see through them, but no one in that house had the courage or interest to question them. Daniel received the news in the morning with his coffee still in his hand. He nodded, like someone who had already been sent away from other places, from other lives. Elisa found out by chance, overhearing from the kitchen, and felt the ground open up beneath her feet. That ground she swept every day, and that had never been hers. That afternoon, while Daniel packed his suitcase, Elisa went to the tool shed. She stood in the doorway, unsure what to say, her heart pounding so hard she was afraid he would hear. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, Elisa saw something she had never seen in anyone's eyes. Pain because of her. Not her own pain, not selfish pain. Pain because she knew that by leaving, he would leave her alone again in that place that treated her like a shadow. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling in a way that didn't match his strong build. He sat in the hammock and took a clear plastic folder out of his suitcase. Inside were documents, letters, a diploma. Elisa looked at him, uncomprehending. Daniel took a deep breath and began to speak slowly, as if walking on ground that could give way at any moment. He explained that he wasn't a farmhand, that he never had been, that he had a degree in veterinary medicine, that he had worked in a clinic in the capital, that he had built his entire life until the day he lost everything. Not because of addiction, not because of crime, because of trust. A partner who embezzled money, forged documents, left debts in his name. Daniel lost the clinic, the apartment, the car, and along with all that, he lost his fiancée, who looked him in the eyes and said she hadn't signed a contract to live with a failure. He left the city with his suitcase and his shame and ended up on farms in the countryside, working with his hands to forget what his mind wouldn't let him forget. He didn't tell anyone because he'd learned that in this world, people don't want to know who you are. They want to know what you have. And when you have nothing, you are nobody. Elisa listened to everything without interrupting. When he finished, she did something she had never done in her life. She reached out and touched his face. Not with passion, not with urgency, with the same care he had used to pick up the baby bird that morning that seemed so distant. And she said, her voice firm for the first time in years, "You are somebody. You always have been. With or without the clinic, with or without money. I know because I am somebody too, even if nobody here has noticed." Daniel held her hand against his face and closed his eyes. In that warm room, smelling of grease and dust, two human beings whom the world had discarded truly met. Not with movie kisses, not with grand promises, with truth, with the nakedness of those who show their wounds and discover that the other has similar scars. He left the next morning, as had been arranged. But before getting into the truck, he handed Elisa the book. Inside the cover, written in small handwriting, were, "For the one who taught me that reading aloud is an act of love. I'll wait for you in the city when you're ready, and I know you will be." Elisa went back to the kitchen, put the book under the mattress, and continued washing the dishes. But something had changed. It wasn't the world around her. Her uncle was still the same, Renata was still the same, the work was still the same. What had changed was how she saw herself within it all. The book under the mattress was proof that someone had been there and truly seen her. And when someone truly sees you once, you can never become invisible to yourself again. In the weeks that followed, Elisa worked as usual, but in her breaks, when her uncle slept in the hammock and the house was silent, she read. She read slowly, stumbling over words, going back to certain sentences, discovering that within the books, there were worlds where people like her had a voice, had a name, had a story, and each page turned was a small, firm step towards a door she was beginning to see. It was on a Sunday in June that Elisa packed her suitcase. The same canvas suitcase she had brought at 14, now lighter because it carried fewer clothes and more courage. He left the house before dawn, without a note, without saying goodbye, not out of resentment, because there was nothing left to say that those walls didn't already know. She walked to the dirt road, waited for the 6 o'clock bus, and sat in the last row, the book in her lap, her heart both tight and open. She arrived in the city with the address Daniel had written on the last page of the book. A simple address, in a simple neighborhood, a 2-story house with a blue door and a handwritten sign, Popular Veterinary Clinic, Solidarity Service. Elisa stood on the sidewalk for a long time, looking at the sign, trying to understand what it meant. He had started over, not in the grand way he used to, not with the luxury of the capital, in the way that was possible, in the true way. When Daniel opened the door and saw her there, with her canvas bag and the book pressed against her chest, he said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes said what months of silence had accumulated. He descended the 2 steps of the entrance and stopped before her, and the two of them stood there, on the sidewalk of a neighborhood no one knew, in front of a clinic that could barely fit 2 animals without money, without guarantees, without anything that the world considers necessary to be happy. But they had something that most people spend their whole lives searching for without finding. They had a quiet certainty that someone saw them, truly, not for what they possessed, not for what they could offer, but for who they were when everything else was taken away. Elisa walked through the blue door and didn't look back. Not because the past didn't matter, it did. Every day of it mattered. Every humiliation, every silence, every sheet hanging on the clothesline at nightfall. All of that had shaped her. But made didn't mean defined. She was more than that. She always had been. Inside, the two-story house smelled of disinfectant and pet food. There was a pregnant cat sleeping in a cardboard box lined with newspaper. There was a makeshift bookcase made of brick and plank shelves full of books. There were 2 chairs, a table, and a window overlooking a yard with a mango tree laden with green fruit. Elisa looked at it all and recognized it. Not the place. She had never been there. She recognized the feeling of arriving, of belonging, of finally being somewhere where her presence wasn't a favor granted, but a choice made with her whole heart. Daniel poured water for the coffee. Elisa sat in the chair near the window and opened the book to the page where they had stopped that last afternoon in the pasture. The page about the sea, about the waves, about the patience of the water. And she read aloud, now without stumbling, now with the firm voice of someone who understood that every stone, however hard, can be transformed, not by force, by persistence, by gentleness, by time. Daniel listened from the kitchen, his eyes moist, his hands busy with the cloth sieve, and there, in that small house, too small for 2 and too big for what they had already lived alone, life began again, without fanfare, without announcement. With a cup of brewed coffee, an open book, and the morning light entering through the window as if asking permission to witness something rare. 2 human beings who refused to give up their own humanity. Outside, the city went on. People hurried past, cars honked, the world spun with its usual indifference. But inside the blue door, something had changed irreversibly. 2 people whom the world had tried to erase were there, whole, visible, alive. And that, however simple it may seem, was everything. It was absolutely everything.